Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be able to give this presentation to you, but sorry not to be with you in person. I'm hoping to give you information and enthusiasm and inspiration today about the possibilities of reflective practice and pastoral supervision groups for clergy wellbeing. My name's Patricia Hunt, and I'm Bishop's Advisor for Pastoral Care in the Diocese of Sheffield. I've been in that role for 3.5 years, and I'm a psychotherapist by training. I'm currently president of the European Association for Psychotherapy, which is an extraordinary role, rather too big for me, but that's somehow where I've been called to be. The Bishop of Sheffield particularly wanted to appoint someone with a professional background to hold the role of Bishop's Advisor for Pastoral Care when he invited me into this role in 2018. And I think there's huge wisdom in that decision. And he and I have worked well together. He has a massive respect for the wisdom that comes from the therapeutic professions. And I think that helps underpin all of the work that we've done together. So when I started, the brief that the bishop gave me was that he was fairly new to the diocese himself, and he had come from the Diocese of Liverpool, and he noticed that clergy were more exhausted than he had noted in Liverpool. And he particularly wanted to address the exhaustion. He said exhaustion, not stress, which I always thought was really important. And he wanted to explore it and think about some strategic and preventative ways of trying to resolve the levels of exhaustion. At about that time, I read a newspaper article about Barack Obama and the fact that he had received letters from the American people and read 10 every day during his presidency. And he said that he felt it helped him make better policies because he really understood some of the grassroots needs of the American people from the letters that he read. So that gave me the inspiration that instead of trying to gather information about the levels of exhaustion through a survey, which can be a bit limited, I invited people to write letters to me. I sent out an email through the bishop's office to all those who hold the bishop's license in our diocese. That's my brief, the pastoral care of all those who hold the bishop's license in the diocese, and also their spouses and partners. So the email went out from me to all those who hold the bishop's license. And I think it gave it street cred because it came through the bishop's office. And I received a cascade of letters. People had sat down for an hour, perhaps an hour and a half, and written 2, 3, 4 sides of A4. I received some paper copies, mostly electronic, and people would just poured their hearts out, really, about the things that were exhausting them. And as you might imagine, there was a huge range of things. But when we boiled it down, it came down particularly to exhaustion and loneliness. Some of the exhaustion was the difficulties in boundary holding and how hard it is to hold the boundary between work life and home life. And also, I felt a really important source of exhaustion was there was a sense of failure, perhaps even some shame and sort of self-denigration, people feeling that if they hadn't got enough people sat in the pews or a service didn't go quite how they wanted, they'd let God down. And that was just deeply self-denigrating for them. They'd let themselves down, they'd let God down, they'd let their calling down. And as you will all understand, all of those things cumulatively are a real drain and a real source of exhaustion. All of this was happening at about the time that the Covenant for Clergy Wellbeing was the early stages of it were being presented to the General Synod. And I picked up from the draft document the idea of pastoral supervision. And that chimed with me because, of course, of knowing how important supervision is as an ongoing part, an ethical, indeed, professional requirement for all the therapeutic professions. So I picked that up as an idea, looked into it a lot more myself, talked to apps, APSE, which is the Association for Pastoral Supervision Education. They are the accrediting body for pastoral supervisors in the UK. And then I submitted and proposed first to the bishop and then to the senior team in the diocese that pastoral supervision for clergy would really address the exhaustion and would address the loneliness. And I particularly emphasized the rhythmic nature of pastoral supervision. It's very close to reflective practice. So I do understand that St. Luke's particularly is keen on reflective practice, and I'm sure a lot of you are working in that field as well. So I think they're very close, and there's a lot of similar strengths, I think. But in pastoral supervision, that sense of it being rhythmic, that sense of it being sustained, not just a one-off CPD event, something sustained, and also the real strategic and preventative nature of establishing pastoral supervision on a basis within the diocese so that it becomes part of the embedded culture of the diocese. So fortunately, they really took to that as being better than a kind of crisis-orientated approach. So I've started I developed a dialogue really through the sending of the letters. And so I started to send out fairly regular messages, always sending them through the bishop's office. And the first one gave the results of the letters and proposed the idea of pastoral supervision. And I really invited people to contact me if they were interested in it, either if they wanted to receive it individually or in groups. And I started with a group of 3 clergy and 1 pastoral supervisor. That's still the model in the scheme, and I find is really good. There's no group that's bigger than 5 clergy and 1 pastoral supervisor, and I think that would get too big, but 2 is too small. 3 is particularly good, 4 is also possible. And so just 2 groups started, but actually I was quite pleased about that because there was a lot to learn. And so these 2 groups started. That was in May 2019, the first groups started. And quite quickly, I began to get positive reports coming back about the ways in which this was helpful to clergy, and felt quite encouraged that this would be something that, if it could grow, might begin to have an impact on a wider basis. After my presentation today, there'll be a couple of quotes from people and also quotes from senior people within the diocese, which just give you a sense of how people have received pastoral supervision and how they feel about it. Money was obviously important, and I managed to access £5,000 per annum from a local group called the Sheffield Church Burgesses Trust. Now, obviously, that's not available nationally, but 5,000 was a good way to start, and perhaps could be found, you know, in other parts of the country from similar kind of organisations. 5,000 per annum for the first 3 years just gave me enough funding to feel, yes, I can get this off the ground. The costs are about £1,000 per group per annum, because basically the costs are the cost of the pastoral supervisor and a venue. There isn't really many costs beyond that. I had an element in that original funding bid to train people, and in fact one member of clergy within our diocese has trained as a pastoral supervisor through the scheme, and through doing that I was trying to future-proof it really and allow for future pastoral supervisors, because I do realise a resource limitation actually is well qualified and accredited pastoral supervisors. That is going to be possibly my greatest resource limitation in the future, I think. So it started with 2 groups, and then the pandemic came, and actually what happened then is more people contacted me, because actually the groups moved to Zoom, and we realized that actually you could effectively conduct a pastoral supervision group through Zoom. So actually it grew during the pandemic, which I'm really pleased about, because it meant that clergy were supported through that time, those who were involved in it. And then in November 2020, we formally launched the Covenant for Clergy Wellbeing in our diocese, and I did a presentation to the whole diocese at that time, and then lots more people contacted me to asking to receive pastoral supervision. So now we have 47, which is, for a small diocese like Sheffield, actually a good proportion. There's 47 people, that's stipendiary and NSMs and curates. One of the bishops wanted to begin involving curates in this, and that's just started. So it's 47 at the moment, which is just really heartening. And I think what I can say is that the last 3 years have seen some green shoots of recovery. And I think the pastoral supervision scheme is at the heart of it. And I think the changes from clergy, there's a change of culture in the diocese. And I think that changes from clergy putting themselves last, seemingly all the time, to being able to pay attention and put much higher up their priority list their own needs, their own well-being, and to realize that actually in doing so, that is an important part of their ministry, because when they're well cared for, then also their congregations are well cared for. And it's rather good to be able to say that in July of this year, the bishop told me that there were no clergy off sick with stress at that point, which I think is something rather miraculous, because it was a very different situation 3 years ago. And I do think that the pastoral supervision scheme has contributed to this. I hope you enjoy reading the quotes that'll come up on the screen quite soon. My email is there as well. If anything that I've said makes you feel I'd like to find out more, I invite you to just email me and I'll try and respond as quickly as I can, because to me, what would be good is if pastoral supervision can begin to benefit people, clergy, much wider, much more nationally, so that we get some kind of a transformation across the country. I wish you all well for the remainder of the symposium today and congratulate St. Luke's on all the work that they do in this incredibly important area. Thank you very much.